From his Central Texas Command Center, deep behind enemy lines, the information war continues. It's Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
It is Sunday, February 7th, 2010, Super Bowl Sunday. And we're going to be live here for the next 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining us. Stewart-Rhodes of Oath Keepers will be with us in the last 30 minutes today in studio. I want to talk about getting our priorities straight as a nation, and how we're distracted and diverted from fixing our country and securing our destiny and our freedoms by things like American Idol and the Super Bowl and other corporate frauds. But I also want to get into Sarah Palin. I watched much of her 1-hour speech to the big Tea Party conference in Tennessee over the weekend. And it is George Bush reincarnated, George W. Bush. The Tea Parties have been fully hijacked and people are being set up. Just like I told the Obama supporters, you were being set up. Henry Kissinger advises Obama. He advises Sarah Palin. The same crew runs these people. John McCain picked her, and she may hold a AR-15 on TV. And she's against the big government takeover of health care and a few things like that, so that's positive. But overall, she's for the Patriot Act, for the police state, for the wars. And she's from the same Republican elite that want to give you open borders and amnesty and all the rest of it. Sarah Palin is not going to save you, America. And, of course, years from now, if she gets elected president, people will go back and say, oh, my God, you were right. We don't have time for this. Okay? The only bona fide constitutionalist who could make a good president and who isn't a distraction is Ron Paul. He's the only one. The presidency itself, outside of Ron Paul, is a distraction. The real fight is at the state level to get our sovereignty back. Anything else is a distraction and a diversion. So that's coming up. Now, I didn't mean for this to be the top story today. It is the top story. Billions of people on the globe can now not visit Infowars.com and Prisonplanet.com. There is a concerted, organized operation going on to shut down access to Infowars.com and Prisonplanet.com in Italy, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in China, and in England that we know of in the last 2 weeks. We have confirmed it. We've got a big report coming out tomorrow at Prisonplanet.com by Paul Joseph Watson. And so that is our top story today. When we come back from the break, House passes cybersecurity bill. That's the New York Times. Kurt Nemo's headline at Infowars.com. House overwhelmingly passes cybersecurity bill. And the Senate version's even worse. Kurt Nemo's working on a story for that tomorrow. But we have gotten so used to the fact that we are being censored in many different ways. And it's not just us. It's going to be everybody. And we know what happened in New Zealand earlier this week and in parts of Australia where they suddenly started shutting down access to websites en masse. Mainstream news of Australia reporting this. If you're in New Zealand and are with one of the big providers, you can't get us. Some of the small ones you still can. If you're in China, you can't get us. If you're in Australia, you can't get us. If you're in Italy, you can't get us on most systems. And it's admitted that we are banned. Infowars.com and Prisonplanet.com. We'll be right back. I remember reading the executive order back in 1993 that Bill Clinton signed, stating that all the 50 states' driver's license systems were being federally standardized for a real ID. And I went on the radio in the mid-90s, and I warned people about the fact that the states were being federalized. A lot of people laughed, even though I had the executive order. They didn't know how to look it up, or they didn't want to. People were not proficient on the internet at that time. And, of course, in 2002, 2003, 2004, they rolled out the Real ID and said, look, your driver's license is really a federal ID card. And, of course, by then, they'd already signed treaties in 2000, making it a world ID card. I remember telling you in 1996, because we had the declassified documents, that all babies in the Western world under a UN program had their blood taken at birth and put in a DNA database for genetic engineering testing, law enforcement purposes. Now it was on CNN yesterday, but spinning it and saying, oh, it's in case your kid gets lost. And, yeah, it is for genetic testing and genetic engineering. And CBS News reports, oh, guess what? They've patented all your blood specifically, and federal courts are ruling you don't even own your own samples. And the big genetic companies have gone and patented your genetic treatments so that if you ever get genetic treatments in the future, you'll have to pay them. That's CBS News. Court rules you don't own your own DNA. The reason I opened the show up with that on Super Bowl Sunday, the 7th day of February 2010, is because you can see what the government's doing many years before they admit to what they're doing. You can see it in white papers. You can read it in different symposium meetings they've had. You can read what the RAND Corporation and the Army War College and the Council on Foreign Relations are saying they're going to do, because they actually write up the policy that's then adopted by government. There has been a decision made about 6 years ago to incrementally shut down the internet as we know it, and to force you onto Internet 2 that's highly restricted, where you have to enter the equivalent of a driver's license number to get online, where everything you do is tracked, where everything you do is stored, and where the Pentagon goes around hacking and attacking websites that criticize the government domestically. And they've since 3 years ago announced they're actually doing that. But Americans especially think they're living in a free country in many respects, so they're in denial about this. Brits are in denial. Italians are in denial. French are in denial. Germans are in denial. Aussies are in denial. Kiwis are in denial. People in New Zealand. Well, the denial now needs to end. And it needs to end very, very quickly. Because people recognize that the global carbon tax was the establishment of world government for, of, and by private banks, and because we exposed the fraud of it, it's now in deep trouble. Because we exposed that the swine flu shot was dangerous and that it was a hoax, and that the swine flu itself was not dangerous compared to the regular flu, record numbers of people didn't take it, and it's now all over the mainstream news that it was a hoax and a fraud. If we can admit to ourselves what's happening to internet freedom and why this is being done, we can save the internet. What the establishment has done is the NSA and DARPA created the internet, as you know, in the late 60s. It is a Pentagon creation. Last year, the Pentagon gave control of the private corporate consortium they created, ICANN, to the UN, because the UN was created by the Pentagon in 1945. It's another front. It's now come out, as we told you 5 years ago. We had a high-level CIA officer, Mr. Steele, on to expose it. It's now mainstream news. Google has always been CIA, set up by In-Q-Tel. IBM is a government front, even pre-OSS. Microsoft is a government front. All these major corporations, the Fortune 100, are government fronts. Just like Hughes Space and aeronautics, it was later came out, was a complete government front. It's all a government front. And then, of course, it makes the insiders that control government fabulously rich. They take your tax money, put trillions of dollars in the aggregate into raw research, and then give it to select groups so they control the global architecture. Now, why am I opening the show with this today? Coming up, I'm going to get into the Super Bowl and how it's a distraction and a diversion. I'm going to get into Sarah Palin hijacking the Tea Party movement, just like Obama hijacked the anti-war liberal movement. We're going to be breaking that down.